late 1970s, religious zealotry combined with a lavish lifestyle led Immanuel David to instigate the most notorious case of murder-suicide in Utah's history. To quote his very own brother, "As I see it, it's not leadership, it's domination." And this is Below the Salt. Righty, are you ready to hear the story of Charles Bruce Longo?
Charles Bruce Longo?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know him by that name. The only name I've heard for this fellow is David Immanuel?
Immanuel David.
Immanuel David, okay.
Yeah, he was Immanuel David until like his 30s.
Oh, okay. He kind of reinvented himself like Madonna.
Not like Madonna.
Not like Madonna?
But maybe his followers thought he was like Madonna.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's hear about him.
Right now we're talking about Charles Bruce Longo. He was born early November in 1938 in New York.
Okay. All right. Oh, he was born in New York. He wasn't born in
Yes, he was born
okay.
in New York. He had one younger brother, and his parents were still married, so he had a pretty decent home life as a child.
Mm-hmm.
He was raised in the Episcopal Church, but they weren't like super religious. That's what you did in the 30s. You know, everybody went to church.
Yeah, everyone went to church somewhere. You know, it probably kind of depended
on
where you were
He
born.
was an altar boy.
Oh, okay.
But
so he was involved somewhere.
Yeah, they were involved, definitely. They were involved in the community. His dad was a pretty wealthy doctor.
Okay.
And his mother, I believe, is just a stay-at-home mom, but she worked in the community a lot.
Okay.
So they were well-known, well-liked.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of normal people.
Yeah, pretty normal.
Cool.
Bruce himself was a very charismatic child.
Charismatic child? Okay.
Yes. There's lots of stories about how he would make stuff up and have these elaborate stories.
And
would make people like him.
Like stories, so, not like lies.
Like lies.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of stories about him showing up late for school with crazy excuses, like saying that his father had fallen and broken his leg, or that on his way to school some guys had tried to mug him.
Oh.
But he was so charismatic that several times that he did that, his teachers believed him. Because he just knew how to sell the story, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. One time there's another story where when he was around 5 years old, threatened his mother that he would run away if she didn't start paying more attention to him.
5 years old, that's kind of
of course, he's 5 years old.
Yeah.
He's throwing a little tantrum, so his mother didn't really pay much attention to him threatening to run away.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna run away.
But he did.
Oh.
And
he's ambitious, that's for
when
sure.
he was running away, he met a cop and convinced the cop to give him enough money to take a bus and then a taxi to his grandpa's house.
At 5 years old?
5 years old.
He's
convinced
grifting cops?
the cop to give him money.
I mean, awful, but impressive.
A smart little kid.
Yeah.
He is a smart kid. For sure. He ended up graduating from high school in 1956 when he was 17.
Okay.
And immediately joined the Marine Corps.
Okay. And it was, you said 1956?
1956.
So, like, this is between World War II and Vietnam. It's kind of the Korean War era?
Yes. Okay. And he actually went to Korea.
Oh, all right.
To Fort Bragg. Okay. After he went to Fort Bragg, he went to Korea. And
Probably
then to
Fort
Bragg.
And then
yes, he was training to be a paratrooper.
Oh, okay.
When he was in Fort Bragg, that was the first place he met some Mormons.
Okay.
Members of the LDS Church.
Mainstream Mormons?
Yes.
Okay.
From Utah. It was just his first exposure to them. And he actually started going to church with them and began reading the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And decided that he liked it. You know, it was for him. It sounded good. So
Mormons are very they're very outgoing about trying to include others.
Yeah, they love talking about what they believe in.
So I imagine
proselytizing is important to Mormons.
Yeah, they are proselytizers.
Yes. But so he liked it, you know, he was interested. He really thought it was something.
Okay.
And so when he was discharged from the Marine Corps.
I assume honorably, because there'd be
It
an
doesn't say
incident,
specifically,
just
but
okay.
discharged in 1959.
They would mention if it was dishonorably, I imagine.
Yeah, it was in 1959, and
Okay.
he traveled back home and was so excited to tell his parents that he had converted to the LDS faith.
Uh-huh.
And that he really was turning his life around. He gave up smoking and he gave up drinking and was really trying to be a better person.
So far, it all sounds pretty good.
Yeah, due to the tenets of the Mormon church, right?
Uh-huh.
And he actually joined the church and became a youth activity leader.
Okay.
And he also was an activity leader for the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
Full time. That's how he worked.
I
when he
did
came
that
back
for
to
a
New
while
York.
when I was in an LDS ward.
Yes. And he was very into it. So much so that when his parents and his younger brother didn't want to convert, he was upset and told them that they were going to go to hell.
Oh.
They hadn't seen the truth of the LDS church. And he even told his godmother that he was not her family anymore because she wouldn't convert.
That's a little much.
So he ended up taking it a little bit far.
Yeah, that does sound a little bit far.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
In 1960,
okay.
so a little under a year after he came home, he went on his mission.
Oh, okay. After his military service,
and I don't know, listeners, if you are super familiar with what a mission is. Do you want to explain it just a little bit, Jack, since you went on one?
Yes, I did go on one. In LDS culture, male members of the church are expected to go on a 2-year proselytizing mission to some part of the world, and share the gospel and try to get some new converts for the LDS church. Until somewhat recently, it was only for men, and then they let women go, and they've adjusted the times of when they're supposed to go. It's 18 or 19 nowadays, depending on.
And like you said, males are pretty expected to.
Males are very much expected to go.
For girls, it's more of a choice. They can go on a mission, or they can stay home and get married
and pop out babies.
Missionary.
Yeah. So it's just part of that. Just part of the expectations of a high demand religion.
Yes.
Is that you go and you serve your 2 years, and it's a big part of it's a big bonding thing. People make contacts on their mission with people from other cultures, and and also with the other missionaries.
Yeah, and it can be a really good thing.
Yes, it can be something that really gets you out of your shell and like it kind of expands your horizons a little bit, or it can do the opposite, and it can kind of build this tribalism, us versus them thing, where the fact that you get rejected over and over again as you're going door to door as a missionary kind of ties you to the church rather than expands your horizons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when Charles went on his mission, he went to Uruguay.
I think in Uruguay they pronounce it Uruguay. But we in English.
He went to Uruguay.
Ooh.
And made friends with a fellow missionary named Skip Danes.
Skip Danes.
That's such a retro.
That's like a
name.
Surfer Bros name.
It's great.
That's cool. He fell out of a surfing movie, I feel like.
Yeah.
Cool.
Skip Danes, he has since recalled Charles as being very, very intense. And had such enormous zeal and excitement about the mission that he was the first one to become fluent in Spanish for the mission. He memorized the entire Book of Mormon and was so excited to go out and convert people that he would even skip meals, forget to eat. It just wasn't important to him.
That's dedication and ambition, and
Skip,
it's a little scary because,
I mean, you need to eat, and
Yeah.
that comes up. Skip also says that he was effective at converting too. He got a lot of people to listen to him, and a lot of people were baptized.
Enthusiasm
with him
can
as
kind of go a
missionary.
long way.
Oh, absolutely.
They in the mission field, it's more in South American and Central American countries because they're already well entrenched in Christianity and things. The LDS Church tends to be a lot more successful in those countries. Whereas if you were to go to Europe, parts of America, parts of Asia, they'd be less successful because they're less Christian focused.
Definitely.
And there's all these studies about how that works, but someone with this kind of ambition going to a country like Uruguay, he would be very successful just because he was so energetic,
Definitely.
and into it.
Definitely, and very charismatic. You
Yes.
remember that little kid. However, he wasn't able to finish his full mission.
Really?
Because he ended up getting really sick.
Well, that does happen.
It happens when you don't eat either.
To North Americans, when you go to South America, sometimes
Yes.
you get a parasite or something. And
it also is assumed that he was hearing voices, though, based on some of the things that he said and some records that we've heard.
Interesting.
That was a part of the reason why he actually was sent home early after being treated.
Was the voices? Oh,
was voices.
Okay.
But he was, listen to this, sent to a hospital to treat hepatitis and jaundice.
You can get hepatitis from, like, accidents.
Yeah. And jaundice,
jaundice
clearly
means,
something is wrong with you.
Well, jaundice could have been a side effect of whatever illness he had.
Mm-hmm.
His liver started shutting down or something.
Yep, and kidneys.
And that could be a combination of a quote-unquote exotic illness that he got from Uruguay, exotic from a North American standpoint, or that he wasn't eating, or any combination.
Any combination.
That's interesting. That definitely, the ambition and the not eating stuff makes me kind of think schizophrenia might be in the play.
Worse. I think so too.
And the voices
agree.
Is the biggest thing.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
So he ended up leaving early, and he actually went to stay with his buddy Skip Dane's parents back in America. And funnily enough, this is kind of interesting to me too, is that Skip was also apparently a convert because his parents were not members.
Oh, very interesting.
And so, of course, when Charles was staying with them, he tried to convert them. He ended up not being able to, though.
Yeah.
But...
Well, if they had a son on a mission and they weren't already
he's kind
involved.
of a dick to them. They still prayed together because they were religious, just not LDS.
And they probably conceded a few things
and
too.
Skip's mother, Mrs. Danes, had arthritis pretty bad.
Early onset, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Bruce insisted that she get on her knees to pray.
Ooh.
So,
that's
he's a little controlling,
kind of a
little bit of a dick. Yeah.
I was just about to say that in LDS culture, coming home early from your mission is kind of a social mark.
Yeah, it's a little taboo.
There's not like official like, hey, if someone comes home early from their mission, you should
yeah, you don't get punished or anything.
No, but there are always whispers and like, oh, so and so came home from early from their mission. They couldn't hack it,
Yep.
And it's very much a part of.
Yeah, I have a cousin that came home early. Luckily she's a girl though, so I don't think it affected her quite as much.
Yeah.
And even me, I'm not a religious person. But just talking to some of my other family members, there has been a little bit like, oh, I hope she's okay.
Yeah,
like,
there's kind of a like, oh,
she's
there must be
fine,
something wrong with you if you couldn't finish your mission.
Yeah.
And women also go for 18 months instead of 2 years.
Yeah, not 2 full years. So, yeah.
So, anyway, just to put another little lens on it, he might have internalized that a little bit as well.
Yeah, potentially. Although it is hard to say because when he first came back, he wasn't even around a lot of LDS people.
True. He was with Skip's family.
His friend's family. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyways, moving on. In 1961, so a little bit, he was probably in Uruguay for about a year. And in 1961 is when he moved to Utah.
Okay. Well, Utah being the headquarters of the LDS faith.
And he enrolled at BYU, Brigham Young
Right.
University. It's a very famous school here.
The church school, not the state
like
school.
one of the 2 schools is Brigham Young.
2 big schools.
And University of Utah.
And Utah State's pretty big too.
Yeah, but not the 2 biggest.
No.
Well, he started studying Spanish more.
Okay.
He was really good at it, something that he enjoyed. And political science.
Interesting.
Yes.
Did he want to get into politics?
It doesn't say if he was actually interested in getting into politics. Just something that he was interested in. Because actually, later on, after he graduated from BYU and was married and everything, he became a Spanish teacher.
Okay.
So,
my mission president was a Spanish teacher.
Yeah.
So
interesting. But anyways, at BYU, he became very close friends with 3 other Mormon men. One of them was Sterling Peacock.
Sterling is a common. It's a name
So's
deep
Peacock.
in Mormon lore.
I know a lot of peacocks.
You know a lot of peacocks?
Out in Tooele, yeah.
Really?
There's a big family.
I've never heard of peacocks
Really?
actually. Huh. But I believe it. Maybe they moved all out west to Tooele.
Yeah, west of Tooele.
Tooele is an interesting town.
Well, yeah, listen to our Slam 49 Fear Factory episode. We talk about it just a little bit. I grew up out there for a while, so.
Yeah.
This is Valerie, by the way, not Jack. So Sterling Peacock was his friend. Another man by the name of Gil Hibben.
Okay.
And Paul Chipman. They all became quick friends.
They all sound like dollar store
like the
Beatles.
whitest whites.
Yeah, I don't know what they're. Like, my name's Gil and my name's Chip.
And the three of them, Paul, Gil, and Sterling, were actually all friends before they met Charles. They all bonded over a shared love of karate.
Oh,
actually,
no.
So.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah, so they knew each other, and then Charles just kind of was allowed to join the group.
Interesting that there's like a. Is there like a karate studio near BYU where they would all hang out or something?
I don't know why they all were in Utah, because they're not all from Utah.
Well, BYU.
Yeah.
Well,
sure, they just all went to BYU,
yeah.
But they met for karate. Like, I don't know. It's weird.
All right.
It's weird. So he became fast friends with them, and also, on the side, he met a girl.
Ooh.
Her name is Birgitta Eriksson.
Whoa,
she's from Sweden.
Oh, okay. I was about to say that's the most like Central European name I've ever heard.
Yes, she's an immigrant from Sweden, and she had converted to the LDS Church in Sweden, and that's why she chose to come to BYU to learn more about it and learn more about the LDS culture here in Utah. And yeah, she just wanted to become a little bit more ingrained.
I wonder how big the church is
right?
in Sweden. I actually haven't heard much about that.
I feel like it's huge. She was baptized apparently when she was 18 by a missionary.
Mm-hmm.
So she had been converted and then moved to Utah pretty quickly after that.
Okay.
And she and Charles were married within months.
Wow.
Months they got married.
That's actually pretty common in BYU.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a big they push for early marriage at BYU.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Margit right now that just keep in mind for later.
Okay.
So, the man who baptized her, his name was Gordon Riddle.
The missionary?
Yes.
Okay.
Remembers her as very soft-spoken. She is easy to laugh and very unskeptical. She was very fast to believe what he said.
Face value type person?
Yes.
Okay.
A quote from him says, she was not what you would call one who challenged everything.
Okay.
So, remember that. For
okay.
later.
All right. I'll log that away.
Yes. Like I said, by the time just a couple months had gone by, they got married, and then Margit actually dropped out of school because she quickly got pregnant.
Ah, yes.
And by the time Charles graduated, only 4 years later, they already had 3 kids.
Whoa.
So they were pushing them out.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty common track for
yeah, it is. That's
young
not
adults
like so weird, especially in the 70s. You kidding me?
Yeah, in Mormon culture, that's actually pretty
normal. Mormons are encouraged to
marry
have
early,
kids,
have kids,
and have a lot of them.
Yeah,
lots of them
as fast as you can.
Yes.
And, yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So far, nothing too
it's
crazy.
Not like too crazy.
Yeah.
He's a little bit.
He's kind of a jerk.
He's a little controlling, but not anything you haven't heard, right?
Right.
So he graduated in 1965, like I said, and they had 3 kids, and he went to teach Spanish. But about that time, he had a vision.
Okay, now we're starting to get into the scary, spooky stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
And he told all his friends immediately after his vision. And this vision was that he would become a very prominent official of the LDS Church.
Like an apostle or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And that his son was a prophet.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yes. And so, of course, like I said, he told his friends immediately when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And word kind of got around, and a lot of other members of the LDS Church didn't like this.
No, that would be kind of frowned upon.
They did not like that he was claiming to be having visions and that he knew his son was going to be a prophet. And
which is funny because
be
the origins of the church is all about this sort of thing.
Yes. But then he started demanding that tithing be paid to him.
Tithing money.
Yes. So tithing in the LDS Church, the members are expected to donate 10% of their income to the church. for building maintenance and political power. And
for a lot of things. They invest in real estate a lot. The
Yes.
church does.
But he started telling the people that he knew to pay to him instead of the church
and
because
the
he would help
church
later on.
would automatically excommunicate him
And
for
he
something
was
like that.
immediately excommunicated
Yep,
after he
exactly.
started doing that.
Because that
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine someone doing that. Like, can you like?
No, like, hey, you know that money that you're donating? Give
To
it
the
to me
church?
instead.
You should give it to me.
Give it to me instead. Don't worry, I'm going to be really important in the church one day.
That's not how tithing works.
Not how tithing works. We could talk a little bit more about tithing and what we think about it, but that's not the point of this episode.
The point is that he got excommunicated, and now he's got a chip on his shoulder,
Yes,
I
he does.
imagine.
So that all happened in 1969.
Oh boy, Summer of Love is going south for our friend
Yes, it
our
is.
friend Bruce.
By the time 1970 rolls around, Charles Bruce Longo had legally changed his name to Immanuel David.
Ah, yes.
So I'm going to start referring to him just as that from now on. Immanuel David is Charles Bruce Longo.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting because that's a big cult thing, is like, get rid of the name that your parents gave you and give yourself a name.
And especially because both
from the
Immanuel and David are biblical figures.
Yeah. Well, I forget what David actually means in Hebrew, but it's actually kind of... Emmanuel is one of Christ's titles or names, Jesus. So, yeah, we're going to do a quick Google.
Yeah, I'm just looking up what David means because I'm not sure either.
David, of course, of the Bible, was the king of the Jews.
David means beloved.
Beloved, okay.
Beloved. Or to love.
Interesting.
Yes. So anyways, Immanuel David, lucky for him, his 3 besties from BYU followed him.
See, that's weird too.
Sterling Peacock, Gil Hibben, and Paul Chipman. They all believed him. They were so convinced by his explanation of his vision and his charisma that they followed him and were also excommunicated from the LDS Church for following him.
That is so... Can you imagine, like, you and your church buddies, and you're the head buddy, because I imagine this kind of guy is the one who, like, I'm the leader of our group.
Yeah, after the 3 are already friends, and this one comes in and he's like, hey, I'm the boss.
I'm the quarterback of this group.
Okay, that's fine.
So your buddy, who considers himself the leader of your little group, says, hey, I'm like a big deal, and you should follow me and like
and you just fucking
leave the church that you've known your whole life and follow me instead. It's so strange that someone would just be like, oh yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
I don't get it at all.
I just don't get it. But we weren't there.
They followed him, and they moved to Manti.
Okay, so central Utah.
Yes,
okay.
And lived a communal lifestyle,
Oh.
running a knife factory because our buddy here, Gil Hibben, was a professional knife maker.
Oh, all right.
So that's what they did for a little while.
Interesting. I mean, that's a legitimate source of income.
Yeah, and at this point, they had like 24 people living with them. 24 in like a year.
How did they get people to go along with this?
I don't know, man. Especially when you find out that Gil Hibben made a large sword for Immanuel because he declared that he was God.
Okay.
He's not going to be a big figure. He was not going to be a large prophet. He was God.
What happened to the vision about him being an apostle?
He was God.
Oh, okay.
He just wasn't ready to know it yet, I believe.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how.
But also get this.
Oh, here we go.
Along with being God, he was also Jesus Christ.
Okay, well,
and
depending
the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so he's the Trinity.
Yes.
But
he
depending
is the
on
Trinity.
Depending on
depending on your religion, you might believe that they're the same entity.
Yeah.
Or you might believe that they're separate. LDS typically
LDS
believes that they're separate.
Yeah.
So he was all 3.
Interesting.
All 3.
And like just like Jesus reincarnated.
Yes.
Okay.
And he would often hold his large sword aloft and declare and vow that he would lop off thousands of head if needed to defend his family.
You see, at a certain point, you have to be like, you have to have like the tiniest bit of self-awareness and be like, this isn't normal. Right? Like, I mean,
I don't
like,
know, man.
I guess if you're this far into it, it's
I know.
just like, yeah.
And he would take a lot of his followers to Temple Square in downtown Salt Lake City a lot and proselytize there as well. They were never violent. There were never any arrests there, but the police would come and like make
keep
him
them
leave.
off of private property.
And something about Immanuel David that you need to know is that he was a little bit more than 300 pounds.
Oh, big dude.
And had
was he
a
tall
long
or
black
just...
beard. Not super tall.
Okay.
But heavy, had a long black beard, and a loud voice.
So he has a presence for sure, but not a very calming one.
Definitely.
He's kind of a big intrusion on people's day.
Yes.
Okay.
When they would go to proselytize in Temple Square, he would often talk about another vision that he had about a great cloud that was going to descend upon the temple in Salt Lake City, and that a bolt of lightning would split it in half, and the entire building would be consumed by fire.
Whoa.
And also
that's apocalyptic.
Yeah. And also that Mount Timpanogos, which is
it's
big,
a mountain
famous mountain here,
very
really
far
good,
away from downtown.
really good for hikes. Yeah, it's about 40 miles south of Salt Lake. Would be transferred to the town of Manti, where Immanuel lived.
Like it would just like lift up into the sky and land over there?
Yeah.
That's a long way away from Manti.
Yes, it is.
I just don't see that happening.
But that was his vision.
Immanuel David.
I
just...
Yeah.
Okay.
So he only lived in Manti for about a year, because in 1971 they decided to move.
Okay.
And also to separate for a bit. So
into different like little groups?
Yeah, into little different groups. So at this point, Immanuel David had 7 children.
Wow.
7.
With
Margit.
Okay.
Who, at the same time he had changed his name to Immanuel, changed her name to Rachel David.
Okay, digging into the
Immanuel David, Rachel David. They're married and they have 7 children.
Okay.
So Immanuel and Rachel, they began moving around with their kids. They went to places like Nebraska, Washington, Montana. They moved around every couple of months.
Were they just moving around to move around, or were they moving around to proselytize?
They were moving around, living in hotels that cost about $100 a day.
So not nice hotels.
Well,
in the 70s, maybe they...
That would equal like almost $400 a night.
Okay, so pretty
So they
decent.
were nice. Okay. And they had nightly room service. They had special requests. They had a lot of stuff that I'll get more into in a second. But they were moving around a lot. And his 3 friends, he told to move up to Spokane in Washington.
Okay.
And they actually opened a karate studio up there to start making money.
Welcome to our LDS spin-off cult / karate studio / knife factory.
Yes. And they did send the money from the karate studio to Immanuel and Rachel.
Oh, well, because he's God.
He's living in these crazy hotels.
Yikes.
You know?
Okay.
And around the same time, he also had a vision that his 3 friends were also reincarnated biblical figures.
Oh, of course. Were they?
And he renamed them.
Oh, here we go.
So,
again, classic cult technique.
Sterling Peacock was changed to Matthias David.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, checks out.
And he was the reincarnation of the Archangel Michael.
Oh, yeah. They can't forget about Michael, who in Mormon mythology is also Adam. Yes. So I'm going to start referring to Sterling now as Matthias. Okay.
Paul Chipman.
Good old Paul.
His name was changed to Jonathan David.
Oh, yes. Jonathan.
And he was the reincarnation of Raphael.
Ah, Raphael. Very cool.
And then,
are we going to get all the Ninja Turtles?
Of course, our good friend Gil Hibben. His name was changed to Peter David.
And hang on, let me guess. He was reincarnated another angel. I'm going to say...
Another archangel.
Yeah, another archangel. Oh, man. I'm blinking on archangels.
Gabriel.
Ah, yes, Gabriel. Okay. Well, okay.
The 3 archangels were sent to open a karate studio in Spokane, Washington.
That's a sentence that has never been uttered before.
It's real good, right?
Yeah,
It's like a Neil Gaiman book.
Oh, man. Yeah, it does. It kind of sounds like shitty American gods. Oh, man.
So, yeah. Here we are. They ran their karate studio for a while. They were sending money. Immanuel David was moving his family all over. And
You will call me Master Dojo Gabriel.
the amount of time that Immanuel would stay in a hotel varied. It usually was just a couple of months. Because every time he left,
It's expensive.
he had thousands and thousands of dollars in debt to this hotel.
Oh, okay.
Because
so he'd rack
he
it
would
up,
pay in
and then
cash
he'd
a
just
lot.
bounce.
Yeah, rack it up,
Well,
bounce. He's gone.
I used to work for I used to work in a profession where we used to pursue collections on people, and I'm not in this profession or this industry anymore. But I know for a fact that when someone leaves the state, it is very difficult to get the money out of them.
Especially when you're not using credit cards and you're not using your real name.
And if there's no internet to try to hunt people down like I had when I was doing collection work. So that actually holds up. Like, he would be able to get away with that for a certain amount of time until the feds started getting involved.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. In 1973.
Okay, so we're moving right along.
He wrote a letter to the Israeli Prime Minister.
Okay.
And the Knesset, I think is how it's pronounced, which is part of the government in Israel.
It's maybe like some sort of parliament?
Yeah.
Okay.
He wrote a letter to them, and he also sent this letter to the LDS Church.
I'm woefully ignorant on Israeli government structure.
I'm not sure either. I didn't have time to investigate it or research it too much.
Sends it to the head of the Israeli government and to the LDS Church.
Sends it to them and sends it to the LDS Church.
Okay.
And in this letter he wrote, and I'm quoting here directly, "I am the father of Jesus Christ that you slew. I am the only one that can deliver you. Without me you will perish. I am the father of Israel, and the blood of Israel runs through my veins." And then in several other letters he wrote to them, he called Spencer W. Kimball, who was the president of the LDS Church at the time, an evil shepherd, and that your people will perish in their ignorance and unbelief.
Goodness.
And around this time, too, he started to declare that he and his followers were the true Israelites, and that white people were true Israelites.
Which is a common thing in late-term Christianity.
Yeah.
That, and in LDS culture, or in Mormon mythology as well, that whites are the tribes of Israel.
Yes.
Which doesn't make any real sense.
No, it does
not.
I
imagine...
Especially because also at this time, he started using the symbol, the Star of David, as his own symbol.
Right. Well, he is Immanuel David, after all.
So a lot of people, just seeing them when they were, like, out proselytizing, assumed that they were Jewish.
Jewish, yeah.
But they were not.
Well, and he's got a big black beard. Maybe they're really ignorant and they think he's like a Hasidic Jew or something.
Who knows? But anyways, he was adopting all these other religious ideas and icons, as his own.
Yeah, that's what cults do.
Yes, it is.
Because it resonates, because it's resonated for thousands of years. Why wouldn't it resonate with your little cult group?
Yep. During this time when he moved around a lot, he would occasionally go back to New York to visit his mother. By this time, his father had already passed, so it was just her. His brother was living down in Florida, and we'll talk more about what he was doing down there later.
Oh, his brother comes back into the picture, huh?
A little bit.
Interesting.
But his mother, she loved him. Of course, she's his mom, but she was not convinced of what he was saying. She did not believe in his religious ideas. She did not believe that he was God. And
sounds like a straight up.
She was also worried about where he was getting money from. And she would ask him a lot.
Did you start a cult?
Yeah. And so
Brucey,
after she started getting real curious about it, he stopped visiting her. And he never saw her again, actually. After the mid-1970s, never saw his mom again.
Goodness. That's really sad. Like, the fact that you can't really hide your cult from your mom any longer is why you stopped seeing her. Goodness, that's... You think she'd have to play along in order for him to pull her into it, so...
Yep.
She's not doing that.
Yep. Also around this time, he told the 3 archangels up in Spokane to sell the studio and go to Washington, D.C.
Oh.
Because he believed that the federal government was about to collapse.
Oh, yes.
And he needed his 3 archangels there to watch and to tell him so that when it was time, he would be able to come and save the day,
Well, the 70s were kind of a turbulent time in Washington. I could see how
they were for sure.
Kind of see that.
They did.
Well, they are the archangels. They got to do what the Trinity told them to do.
They didn't have a job in D.C., and they ended up living on the streets for a while and staying in grates while sending any money that they possibly got back to Immanuel to let him live in $100 a day suites. Like,
yeah. Why would you
feed his kids?
Yeah, why would you feed your family?
And also, these men have families of their own, wives and children that are also part of the cults that are left behind. They're still in Washington. They're still in Utah. They just
does the cult have like an official name?
Just the family of David.
They just
or
call
the
it
David
family. Okay, cool.
Yep. So Immanuel had them stay in Washington, D.C. for about a year.
Wow. And I guess they're supposed to, if the federal government collapsed, they were just supposed to jump on the remains and like take over the country?
Yeah.
Cool.
But so after about a year, Immanuel David moved back to Utah and called his followers back to him because he had made a discovery about the golden tablets, the golden plates from the Mormon religion. And when they all came back,
the beginnings of the
they were excited because he said he had the plates.
Ooh, well, that's an overpromise.
So of course they all rushed back.
Yeah.
And then when they got back and saw that he didn't have them, he said he was the plates.
I'd be so pissed.
He was the plates.
Come on, Bruce. Give me a break. Jeez.
Yup.
Wow. Well, I imagine that didn't go over so well, even. Like, did this test their limits? And they're still just like, oh, okay.
I imagine several of them began questioning around this point because about a year later, some of them start leaving.
Okay.
But not yet.
Oh, all right.
Not yet.
On board.
Yeah.
Okay.
Upon his move back to Utah, Immanuel got back in touch with his mission buddy Skip Danes.
Hey, Skip.
Yeah.
Oh,
they were
how
just
you doing? Oh, what have you been up to since the mission?
Yeah. Skip absolutely did not believe that Immanuel was gone.
Because Skip is probably
But he was still kind of
rational.
like a buddy, and he actually helped arrange for Immanuel to buy two $47,000 pianos.
All right.
Two. $47,000.
Was Skip a piano salesman?
He was not, but he actually owns a music store in Salt Lake right now.
Really?
So he was into it, and he knew people that could get this kind of stuff.
All right. Well, Skip,
he might
do what
piano,
you need to do.
He's into it. But so, he helped try to arrange that. It never ended up going through. But he was trying to arrange it, and he says...
I hate to interrupt, but did he say why he needed the pianos?
He wanted them because his wife Rachel played.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually kind of sweet.
Yeah.
He's using evil cult money for it, but okay.
But Skip says that Immanuel was constantly talking about how he would be fabulously wealthy soon. And
how Immanuel would be, not Skip.
That Immanuel would be wealthy soon. Immanuel was always talking like this.
Yeah.
And that one day he would be able to march right down into the main shopping center in Salt Lake and buy $1 million worth of stocks if he wanted to, because he would be so rich.
I don't know if they have that, but okay.
And he also would show photographs of this house in Phoenix, Arizona, that he wanted to buy that cost a little more than $8 million. And remember, this is back in the 70s.
Yeah, that's a
and
big
he said,
place.
"This is the house I'm going to live in soon.
Okay.
One day soon. This is where I'm going to live."
Phoenix aspirations.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He also would drop by a bunch of car dealerships to look at the Rolls Royces.
Ooh, fancy.
And there's also a plot of land in Salt Lake City that he was interested in as well.
He just wants it all, man. He's just like absolutely power hungry mad lad.
Yep. At this time, he and his family were living in the International Dunes Hotel.
Okay.
Which is right downtown Salt Lake. It's across from what is now the Salt Palace.
Convention Center.
Which we love. We love going to FanX.
Yeah, go Comic-Con.
Yeah. Super fun.
Yeah, it's 3rd South.
Yeah, like 3rd South and West Temple.
Yeah.
So right smack
downtown.
in the middle of downtown. And they lived up on the 11th floor in the big suite.
Nice.
They had lots of
I think it's
fancy meals.
It's like a Hyatt or something now. It's been recently remodeled.
Yeah, it's not the International Dunes Hotel anymore.
No, it's been like 3 hotels since the 70s.
Yep. But that's where they were living.
Cool.
But it would not last.
Oh, well,
of course.
Cults never do.
And like you said, when you're spending that much money on that kind of stuff and you don't have a job and haven't had a job for years,
the feds start showing up.
The FBI gets involved.
Oh, yeah.
So
the one part of the feds that's always on the money is the finance department.
Yep. And Gil Hibben, our buddy,
Oh, did Gil
Peter David,
rat him
and
out?
Sterling Peacock Matthias David had both been arrested for wire fraud.
Oh, for bad money orders. Wire
Yep.
fraud.
And
Ooh.
it turns out that Matthias, Sterling Peacock, had been getting money from a lot of people, like back in Washington, D.C. and Spokane, by telling them that he had a daughter, or a friend had a daughter, who was very sick and needed medical help, and that they didn't have enough money. So
basically.
charity fraud, yeah.
Okay.
So they have both gone arrested. Matthias,
so the noose is starting to tighten here.
Yes.
Which cults love, by the way, when the noose is tightening, because that means the cult leader can just squeeze on their people a little bit more.
Yeah. And so, other than the money from his followers, it's also believed that Rachel had some family still in Sweden that were wiring him money as well.
Okay.
Because they were also followers.
He went international?
Yes, he did.
Oh man, he's evil, but I'm happy for his success. I'm not.
No.
It's terrible.
No.
Yeah. He's swindling people, even overseas.
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
So, now we're in July 1978.
Okay.
Sterling Peacock / Matthias David is in prison for wire fraud.
Okay.
Gil Hibben / Peter David has since been released from prison, and he, along with Paul Chipman, who was... I'm blanking on his name.
Raphael?
Yeah, he was Raphael. His name was Jonathan David, though.
Yes, that's
They had both left the cult. They were out.
Okay, see, that's when things start splintering a little bit.
They were out.
If when you lose your
Two
your
of your
top
biggest
three,
followers were out. Your strongest follower, who also Matthias had been his bodyguard, was in prison for wire fraud.
No karate
You
help.
were running out of money. The feds are investigating.
You got a ton of debt.
So Manuel went to his friend Skip Dane's house.
Okay.
And almost crestfallen is the word that was used to describe him.
Okay.
Said that he really needed some help.
It's sad to lose your cult, you know?
He needed to borrow Skip's truck. They had to leave the hotel that they were staying at. His kids were really sad and didn't want to, but he needed to move, so he needs the truck. He must borrow it immediately, please.
Oh, all right.
So Skip, of course, being his friend, gave him the truck.
It's nice of Skip.
Yep. And then 2 days later, they found Immanuel David's body up in the canyon in the truck, and he had used a hose to pump the carbon monoxide into the cab.
Exhaust. Oh, man.
And killed himself. Committed suicide.
You know, it never, ever ends well.
No, it does not.
Wow. Killed himself.
Yes, he did.
That's a sad ending to kind of a sad story.
Except that's not the end.
Oh, no.
No, it is not. Immanuel David is done.
Yeah, his story's over. What else do we got?
We're going to go back a little bit and talk about his lovely wife, Rachel, and their 7 children. So, remember how I said that Rachel was pretty easy?
A little naive.
A little naive.
Yeah.
I meant to say pretty easy to...
easy to believe.
Convert.
Yeah, she's...
quick to believe.
Quick to believe.
She wasn't easy like a slut, but...
That's a weird aside. Okay.
So she has been following him devoutly for the past about 15, 16 years they've been together. And his children are the same way.
Because they're raised by their mom and their dad.
There are some interviews from some of the hotel employees, the International Dunes Hotel, where they were staying, saying that they almost never saw the kids.
Oh, that's interesting.
They never used the pool. The only times they would see them if they were walking through the halls behind their parents, and they are described as ducklings, always walking in an orderly line. They said if any
Did they ever really leave the hotel room?
Not really. Okay. They didn't go to public school.
Okay. They did, you said?
They did not.
Oh, okay.
And that has been talked about a little bit because especially back then
Shouldn't
when there's no records,
the
the
authorities
schools
been on
really
top of it?
don't know about them. And because they've been living in a hotel, they're not a part of the census.
Interesting.
Yes. So they have really just been able to slip
flying
through
under
the
the
cracks.
radar. All right.
Yes. It said the kids were very well behaved. If any of the employees ever said hello to them walking past them in the hall, they would always look to their father and wait for his response before they were allowed to respond.
Yikes.
Yeah. So they just were very quiet.
Yeah.
Very, very quiet. And
obedient little ducklings.
Yeah.
Well, that was probably very heavily reinforced in their family.
So after their father was dead, after he killed himself, authorities, of course, went to Rachel to inform her of what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she said...
Yeah, what happens when someone says, hey, the person you think is God just killed themselves?
She was said to have expressed excitement and concern. She talked a little bit about her fears of how they were going to continue paying the bills, how they were going to be able to stay in the hotel room where they were going to live. But she was okay. And then on August 3rd, only about 3 days later, around 7 o'clock in the morning...
Oh, no. Here we go.
Rachel took her 7 children to the balcony of their 11th floor suite.
Oh, dear.
And told them to jump.
Wow.
So here's some content warning coming. These kids die. If you don't want to listen to it, that's okay.
7 kids.
Her oldest child is 15.
Okay.
And it's a girl also named Rachel. Her name's actually Elizabeth, but they call her Rachel. So her 3 oldest children begin stacking chairs on the balcony so they can jump off.
Oh my god.
They are going to jump. Their mother has told them to jump, and that is what they're going to do.
That's
the youngest kids
don't have a choice because they
don't want to do that.
Yeah, no.
They're not going to freaking jump. Are you kidding? They're scared. They don't want to jump.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt. So this fucking monster, Rachel is the worst person in this story, I think.
Yeah.
Along with her 3 oldest children, pick up the 4 youngest and toss them over the side.
So murder, not suicide.
Yes, murder.
Oh my god.
Toss them over the side. Onlookers.
11 stories is... There's no way to survive that, right?
Yeah.
There's...
No. Onlookers say they can hear the younger children screaming.
Oh god.
But Rachel and the 3 older kids are just not saying anything. They just pick them up and throw it. And one onlooker says he could even see Rachel pick up one of the younger ones. And as she was putting this younger child over the balcony, the kid was trying to hold on to it. Oh. And she pried his fingers up to let him drop.
Wow.
And then the 3 older children got up on the chairs and jumped themselves.
Willingly, yeah.
And of course, the whole time it's only 7 in the morning, but there are onlookers, and they are screaming, crying, telling them not to jump. What are you doing? And then after all the kids have jumped, Rachel stands up and is about to jump. And this, I can't confirm because I only found it in one place, but it says that one onlooker shouted, "Jump, you bitch, jump."
Wow, because they're like, yeah, you just killed your kids.
Yeah.
Like, you might as well jump too, you piece of garbage.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
6 of the children die. And Rachel, the mother, dies. The oldest daughter, the oldest child, Rachel, survived.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I just...
It says that 4 of the children...
How does a mother do that to her own children?
No, I don't know. And that's why I think she's the worst one.
Yeah.
I can understand a shit piece of human killing themselves when you think... And abandoning your family. I mean, really, I can't understand it logically, emotionally, I can't. But it happens, okay. Yeah. But killing your own children...
And so many of them,
and convincing your children to kill themselves... She's a monster. And I hope that if there's a hell that she's there.
Wow.
But... So 4 of the children and the mother died pretty much immediately on contact.
Or, within a minute or 2.
Yeah.
Because there's trauma like that.
There's crazy trauma.
You can survive for a minute.
Yeah. 3 of the children were alive long enough to get to the hospital, but they died really soon after. They didn't even live for a full day.
11 stories, that's... content warning here. You know what's happening.
Oh
for
yeah,
long enough.
you know you're falling. You know what's about to happen. Rachel, the oldest daughter, she was about 15 at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Is the one who survived,
Yeah.
and she was taken to the hospital.
Yeah, she's not doing so hot.
And it was not known if she was gonna live for days after this.
Wow.
It was still unsure. She
multiple surgeries,
had
I assume.
Both legs broken.
She landed on her legs. That's how she survived.
She survived most likely because she hit an awning before hitting the ground.
And kind of pinballed off.
She hit it like in a way that she straddled it, and it went up into and split her pelvic bone. Oh. It split her pelvic bone. She also had a broken arm, a broken jaw, missing teeth, had bitten part of her tongue off, dislocated her shoulders, and a ruptured spleen.
Yeah, I guess 11 stories will do that.
Yes. And then the fractured shoulder displaced her abdominal cavity just enough so that the split from her pelvic fracture bruised her lungs.
Oh my god. That it is the fact that she is alive is a testament to the medical community.
She's still alive today. She's alive right now. She's in her late 50s. But yeah, she's alive. And she survived that. Can you imagine getting your pelvic bone split like that? Not even just shattered.
I'm kind of just at a loss for words on that catastrophic list of injuries.
She had 5 blood transfusions in like a day because of all of that. And of course, she had
I do not have
hours
words.
and hours of surgery. And even after all that, the doctors were like, there's still a 50-50 chance that she's going to die here.
Just that much trauma. Like, your heart could just be like, sorry, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But honestly, the fact that she was 15 and she might not have been, how she was like probably in
she was probably smaller.
The 100-pound range. Yeah. Wow, like the stars crossed for her survival right there.
Yep.
Wow, it's just that is an absolutely like the murder first of all. Yes. All the suicide.
It was classified as 6 counts of homicide. Yeah. And attempted homicide.
Well, because they're minors.
Yes, because it was all put on the mother, of course.
Yeah, well, and the mother can't be tried either.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Holy cannoli.
Mm-hmm.
That is... wow.
Yep.
That's like a mini Jonestown in Salt Lake City.
It's horrible, right?
Yeah,
it's horrible.
So, okay. So my first thought is that this miracle survival thing, if the cult still exists after this, they are going to love this miracle survival thing.
It does.
Oh, no.
They do.
Oh, my gosh.
So.
It's like, oh, yeah, you survived the murder attempt from your mom.
Yep.
Or your own suicide attempt, kind of, too. Oh, jeez.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, let's proceed.
So that's the end of the immediate David family.
Holy crap.
Mostly.
That is absolutely haunting.
Yep.
And that's horrific. Okay.
Yeah. So I have a little bit more to go over, and it is all kind of an update of what is happening now with the cult.
So from 78
So that was 78. And this next part comes from a bunch of articles that I found that were from like the early 2000s.
Okay.
So about 30 years after the suicide, but about 10 years ago from now.
Okay, so there might have been more updates.
Yeah, it's possible that there's been more stuff happening, but I haven't been able to find anything. Okay. So there's about a dozen members left.
Okay, and what did they peak at? Do you know?
I did not ever find an official number. I imagine it was like 3 or 4 dozen only.
Okay, so not huge.
No.
Okay. Woof.
But it still exists in Aurora, Colorado.
Okay.
And in Spokane, Washington still.
Hey, karate studio.
Matthias David, after being released from prison, went back and opened his karate studio in Spokane. So that is where he is. And he actually... Wow. Up until recently, I did find this out, trained the SWAT members of Spokane,
really?
The police force, because he was so good at karate. He trains them. But then they found out that he has been like convicted of wire fraud and is a felon, and now they're like, they don't use him that much anymore. But yeah, so he helped train them. But he still goes by Matthias David. He is not Sterling Peacock. Wow. Matthias David.
Welcome to Matthias David Karate Studio. Mm-hmm.
He also believes that he's the reincarnation of Moses.
Oh.
And that's what he says to
actually, that makes sense from like a mythological standpoint, because Moses was the one like that to lead them out of the wilderness and lead them out of captivity after the big calamity had happened.
Yes.
So it makes sense that he's like kind of a transition prophet. Mm-hmm. Because in modern LDS, mainstream LDS mythology, Joseph Smith was like the Joseph of old times. Yep. Which is kind of funny that they had the same name. But like he started it, the whole 12 tribes of Israel thing, and he, but Brigham Young is the Moses because he's the one who transitioned out of that initial stuff and out to a different place and led the Mormons out of the wilderness, if you will. So there's a lot of, that's how mythology kind of works. Yep. Is that it kind of just repeats itself over and over
again. It does.
So it's interesting. Interesting that even on a kind of a micro level that happens. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Matthias David, he's one of the main leaders of it now. And the other leader is a man who goes by Jacob David. And I have not actually been able to find his real name. Oh. He, I believe, is Immanuel's wife, Rachel's real brother.
Oh, biological brother.
Yes. Because he...
Well, they were in it pretty deep because they were paying money and stuff, so...
He is currently the guardian for Rachel, the daughter. So she's still in the cult.
With her uncle?
Yes.
Her uncle's got to be old.
Yeah, he might not even be still alive because, like I said, this article's from like 10 years ago. Yeah. But he could be in his 70s, maybe.
Wow.
But yeah, so she was released into custody of her uncle, who was also a member of the cult.
You see, well...
I mean...
Yeah, he's the next of kin, but also... He's also involved in the cult that led her mother to the suicide and murders.
There's some weird stuff. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but just going back a little bit off on a side thing. Mm-hmm. How Immanuel had his 3 followers like separate from their families. Mm-hmm. Jacob David, who's the guardian of Rachel, is actually married to a woman named Ruth David, who is the ex-wife of Matthias David. And they're all like still friends. But weird. Ruth and Matthias were married back in the 70s, and then something happened, they split up, and now Jacob and Ruth are married. I don't know how that happened, or why that happened, or what is going on.
Cults are a hell of a drug.
I am wondering if there's some kind of, like, plural marriage going on there.
I mean,
not exactly, like, it's not polygamy, of course, because that woman has been married to 2 of these men. Yeah. I don't know what is happening. And Matthias has been quoted as saying that Jacob David is his brother. They are brothers together, and that they're all a family. So I don't know.
I imagine there's just like a limited dating pool
who will believe
inside a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Mhm. And Peter David and Jonathan David.
So many Davids.
Gil Hibben. It's because they all have the same last name. Yeah. It's their last
name. The David
name.
family.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So Peter David and Jonathan David, who are Gil Hibben and Paul Chipman, they're the ones who had left the cult, are still... They don't believe anymore. They do not want anything to do with it.
They probably went back to their normal names.
But they are being consistently, regularly contacted by the cult, trying to get them to come back.
Really?
Yes.
That is weird.
Funny aside, also, Gil Hibben, who was the one who knew how to make knives and open the knife factory, is also the guy who designed the Rambo Bowie knife from the movie back then.
The actual Rambo
Yeah, the actual
Bowie
Rambo knife. He did that.
Him.
Yep, and he still runs a big knife company, and his Bowies are, like, famous. So if you want to look him up, you can look up Gil Hibben, and it really won't say anything about the cult in his Wikipedia.
No, they probably left that out. Very interesting.
So kind of interesting. Yeah. But so they're constantly contacted, and...
Well, he's got money, so they're probably like, he's a whale to them.
Yes, he is. Yeah. Matthias David says, he was actually asked about it. He's been interviewed before. And he says that they do not try to contact him. They are the Judas Iscariots. And they do not want anything to do with him anymore. But there's records of it happening.
Interesting. Wow. What a twisted little tale of drama there.
It's really weird, huh?
That is bizarre. So,
Really weird.
So they're mostly in Aurora and Spokane.
Aurora and Spokane. And like I said, Rachel David, the daughter, still lives with Jacob David, her uncle. She is in a wheelchair. She really can't do a ton on her own.
No.
Her mental capacity is not all there.
Oh, she had some brain damage from all the trauma.
But she still very much believes in it too. And she actually has tried to kill herself several times since then because she believes
she missed out. She failed or something.
Yeah. She is trying to kill herself, and she believes that her father is going to come back one day as a second coming, you know. And yeah, she really needs constant supervision. She really can't do anything. And that's so sad. Like, can you imagine, like, maybe if she had not been re-released to the cult, if she could have had, like, a fairly normal life
if she'd even been put into state custody.
Yeah.
You know, or into,
foster care,
even. Foster care,
Yeah, I just can't imagine what her life could have been like and what her life is like. It's horrible. There are a couple other people that speak about the cult occasionally. One of them is the daughter of Matthias David, she's actually a nurse here in Utah now. I won't say her name, but the daughter of Matthias David, and she is actually really scared that the cult exists still.
I would be.
She says as a child growing up in it, she was abused a lot.
Oh, wow.
She says it just was a really weird environment, and that one of the things she remembers specifically, when older kids would kind of act up, adults in the group would each grab their one arm and one leg and then pull on them, like drawn and quartering, right? But just as a little bit of a punishment until they would scream in pain. Like, they would do it to hurt them. And Immanuel David himself would take his sock off and put his foot into the kid's mouth.
Oh my gosh, that's gross. I mean, like, I
know,
if Immanuel David's like this big 300-pound guy, and he's probably got gross.
Yeah, and they like communal living in Manti. Yeah.
Gross.
So it's just weird.
Well, that's kind of how cults do. They come up with weird punishments and stuff. That's just, and it's not good. And if you're in a cult, seek help.
Yep. Another person who speaks about the cult sometimes is Immanuel's biological brother, Dean Longo.
Okay.
He was never involved in it. He was the one who lived in Florida. And he actually was a police chief.
Very cool.
And he was a police chief during
all the
cult stuff. So he just, wasn't really involved with the family. They didn't ever talk. So he says he didn't really know what was going on.
What a bizarre thing.
And since finding out what has happened and still knowing the cult exists, he too says that he just is sad and a little scared that it's still there. And some of the old followers, again, like Hibben and Shipman, they say that they're scared of the suicides happening again.
Yeah, I can
Matthias
see that.
says, no, we're not going to do that again. That was for Immanuel to dictate.
Oh, good.
But we're not going to do it again.
Well, I'll sleep easy knowing that they're not going to suicide.
But Hibben says they both believe it could happen again. They say if something happens, if one of them has a vision like Matthias David wants, because part of the reason Matthias wants the other two to rejoin is because he believes if the archangels are together again, it will bring about the second coming of Immanuel. And so they say, if Chipman and Hibben say, if Matthias or Jacob or any of the other Davids believe that they have a vision or something from Immanuel,
suicide is just around the corner.
Could absolutely have suicide or murder again.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the story of the David family cult.
Well, holy crap. That's
the most crazy murder-suicide here in Utah. And tragic child death. Like, it's the worst thing.
It's hard
to
I
think that's the worst thing that somebody can do. To kill your own children.
Yeah. Murdering children, bad. Murdering your own children, worse.
The worst.
Yeah.
Like, it's horrible.
Wow.
It's horrible.
Wow, what a tale. Thank you for digging up all that info for us.
A lot.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I've actually I heard a little bit about the hotel is haunted now.
Yeah, even the rebuilt building.
But it's all very, very unsubstantiated and not collaborated at all.
Interesting.
But they say they hear children's voices in the halls sometimes, which is spooky.
That is spooky and sad.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway.
Anyways, that was the David family, and I'm Valerie.
And I'm Jack.
And this is Below the Salt.